Welcome back, dear travelers, to Tales from the Enchanted Forest with your hosts, Fox and Sparrow.
Fox, we are so back. It has been a while. Oh, I've missed you. I've missed this.
Yes, we kind of just impromptu trip away from the Enchanted Forest.
Quite literally, I would message Fox and be like, hey, you ready to record? And then Fox would be like, I'm actually away. I won't be back for like 2 weeks. And then when she got back, she's like, hey, you ready to record? And I'd be like, I'm actually away now. It's just, summer got crazy.
Yes, which we knew was going to happen. So I don't know why we expected it, why it was a surprise. But I think these kind of things just creep up on you. Especially since June and July went by really slowly. And then it felt like August was gone. I couldn't even get my bearing in August.
Here's the thing. I find like from January to, I don't know, May or April, it kind of feels like you're like slowly building up speed on a treadmill or something. You're build up to a reasonable pace. June and like July usually are like at kind of your peak, like your comfortable pace. And then end of August and September hit, and it just suddenly spikes to some crazy speed, and then suddenly you're just speed running the rest of the month, the rest of the year, and next thing you know, January's here again, and you've just like crashed and burned, and you have to restart the whole thing.
Well, I just checked my Animal Crossing account, and do you want to know what season I have decorated for?
I'm gonna guess Easter?
No, actually, I still have my Christmas things up. So I opened it up because I was like, oh, I probably have to like take down all my summer stuff, because at this point I think it's just that I'll play Animal Crossing. Well, I haven't really had time, but when I do play Animal Crossing, I think I just play it to change my seasonal decor. It's to get that hit of like overconsumption without over-consuming anything.
Yeah.
Like those Instagram people that completely redecorate their houses. See, I do not do that. So I need to do that somewhere, and I do it on Animal Crossing. But I didn't realize that I haven't opened it up since winter. So that was kind of a shock to see all my winter pathways, and I was wearing a jacket, and all of my Christmas trees were everywhere. And of course, my island is only ever 30% done at any given time. But my first thought was, oh, I should flatten it and start again.
I love that.
I have a problem.
You know what? As long as you enjoy the loop, the process, like there's no issues there. This actually does slide into what I'm doing a bit. So recently I just was craving a new cozy game. I don't know, like earlier this year I picked up Slay the Spire, which I would not classify as a cozy game, but it's a roguelike, so you can go through it really quickly and like it's repeatable. So it's kind of an easy game to pick up while you're like listening to other stuff or whatever after a while. And I was really getting sick of that game. I don't know why. I keep coming back to it, picking up, and then playing a couple rounds, and then I get really sick of it. I'm like, why am I playing this again? So I was like, I need a new game to replace this. And so I picked up a new game called Spiritfarer. It's so weird. It's such a cutesy art style, and it's very cozy. Like you have a ship, you build on the ship people's like homes, you get like crops, and then you get like all this other animal stuff to get resources. But your whole goal of the game is to like find lost souls and help them kind of fulfill their last wishes and then usher them into the afterlife. But it's all super cute art style, but then suddenly a character will get you like emotionally invested in their life, and they're like, I'm ready to move on. You're like, no, but Gwen,
Please don't go.
Please don't do this to me. So I've been playing that, but I've been doing that while listening to Dimension 20. I was listening to just another season of theirs. I won't go into it right now. But I've been doing that multitasking of listening to not audiobooks, but just kind of other media as I enjoy this kind of cozy game that doesn't require as much attention.
That's exactly what I did with Spiritfarer as well. I had an audiobook, or I had like a nonsense, like kind of trashy show playing in the background. One that I don't really need to listen to because it's probably just like a dating show or something. But yeah, I feel like I've gotten to the point where if I'm playing a slow game, I can't just play it, which is kind of a shame. I feel like I'm an iPad kid sometimes where I need to have multiple avenues of stimulation at the same time. Because I also can't just listen to an audiobook. I have to be going for a walk, or I have to be doing a puzzle or something like that. So playing a nice, cozy game while also listening to something is just top tier evening activity.
Yeah, I've been experimenting with that. I do find, like, when I first started Spiritfarer, I had to do, like, the first, I don't know, you had to be even maybe 10 hours of just playing that game before I was able to add in. Like, I have to become super familiar with the thing, and both things, too. Like, when I first started listening to people play D&D, and, like, specifically these people playing D&D, I could not multitask. Like, I just had to focus on them first. So I feel like it's, like, something I have to build up to. Where I'm like comfortable if like I miss a little bit here or there on like the show or the game because I have enough inherent knowledge of both the things to enjoy together. Yeah. And sometimes I just also can't. Sometimes I just have to focus on the one.
Yeah, I mean there are certain ones where like you end up doing like the death replay where you keep having to go back because you keep forgetting something or not paying attention to something enough times that you're kind of like, did I hear that? What happened?
What was your story?
Well, like, what were you talking about? What is the point of this in the plot?
Anyways, that's been me. What have you been up to?
So, I'm going to be like a broken record, but I have been obsessed with the Epic Saga, which is, for anyone who's new to the podcast, is essentially a concept musical by George Rivera Herons. It's so weird saying his name because on his Instagram, he always just refers to himself as like Mr. Jalapeno. So that's what I've been referring to him as. But it's loosely based on Homer's Odyssey. And a concept musical is not like a real musical, like Hamilton or something like that. It's the concept of the musical. So they have all the songs and it's built up so that it could be performed. And it's based on Homer's Odyssey. It has 5 completed sagas for Act 1. So the Troy Saga, the Cyclops Saga, Ocean, Circe, and Underworld. And then Act 2 is kind of like there was a break. So in the Underworld, he goes down to speak to, I won't give any spoilers, but he goes down to the Underworld, figures out some information, and then comes back up. And that's when Act 2 starts. And this one, I think, also has 4 sagas, with 2 out now, including the Thunder Saga, which came out early in the summer, and the Wisdom Saga, which just dropped. And I cannot explain how much I am obsessed with the music, the storytelling, the animations the fans are creating. And in general, I just love his music so much. I listen to it on repeat. And what I usually do is I'll listen right before the next kind of chapter comes out. I'll listen to the whole thing because it is a story, right? So it is a continuous story. And I really love when a new saga drops, looking for those hints or Easter eggs because every character has their own kind of sounds that go with them. So like harps or woodwind, or some people have a specific way they sing. It's honestly, it feels my need to sing really, really badly, of course, but my need to just like belt out crazy songs at the same time as learning about the myths and of course the stories, and my mythical nerdness is so happy because it feels like I'm consuming different types of media at the same time. It feels like I'm watching something through all the fan animations that people make. It feels like I'm reading something, and so I have just been listening to every song. My 2 favorites from this one are Love in Paradise and God Games. It's almost like that that game you were talking about where it's like a musical but it has the Greek myths in it. The Greek gods.
Stray Gods.
Yes. The gods singing is just one of my favorite things because it's I've always been obsessed with the Greek gods. Who hasn't? So if anyone out there is a massive mythical nerd, Greek nerd, or just a musical nerd, and you want that Hamilton kick without watching Hamilton again or listening to any of the Hamilton songs again, I highly, highly, highly recommend the Epic Saga.
I like how at one point you're like, I'm not going to spoil it, but it seems like it's a retelling of Homer's Odyssey, which has been out for, a little while now.
Yes.
It's definitely past the spoiler point, but I thought it was very cute. You're like, I'm not going to spoil it. Homer's Odyssey. I don't want to spoil
Homer's Odyssey, one of the oldest epics in the world. Well, one of the oldest epics. I think more so I don't want to spoil which characters you'll meet because it isn't linear. Like he doesn't follow just one character or he doesn't follow the exact story as it happened. I think he had to put out like a little video being like, hey guys, this isn't Homer's Odyssey. Please don't use the epic saga as like a source or as like a Spark Notes version of the Odyssey. It's not that, because in his story, in Epic, his Odysseus is very into his wife. He's like one of those wife guys. And it's very sweet, and his love and longing for his wife are quite prominent themes. However, I mean, in the actual Odyssey, as well as other stuff like that's come out, other media that comes out, he doesn't always get the best edit, because he does end up with a couple different women. Not always his fault. But a lot of people are like, oh, Odysseus is so faithful and so true to his wife after 10 long years. And he's like, this Odysseus is.
And this is the other thing with adapting specifically Greek myths and like a lot of other stories, of course. There are so many variations out there, like documented variations, that there is no one true version, even like that people could make a good argument for. Like, there's always going to be another version out there, but like there's also this variation, you know? So they always can at least have some license being like, well, we're pulling from different sources and also creative license.
Well, technically the Odyssey, if you're talking about in terms of like the Greek gods and their involvement, that does vary. But the Odyssey itself with Odysseus's journey is pretty much the text you would read to learn about his journey. Because he's a mythical figure more than he is an actual god. Actually, he's not a god at all. I don't know why I said he's not an actual god. He's not a god. So his story is quite almost set in stone. But the god's involvement sometimes changes, and there are interpretations, of course, because the Odyssey is a translated text. So every time someone translates it, they bring out something else, or they pick a different interpretation of a word that's been used, and that kind of changes the entire meaning of the text. So lots of really good Greek stuff at the moment. There is Chaos. I think that's the new Netflix show that's about like a modern day Greek gods. Percy Jackson, of course, one of my favorites, is coming out with season 2 soon. And of course, there's so many podcasts and documentaries, and there's always something with the Greek gods. So this is just that extra little bit. And I haven't seen a musical about the Greek gods. And I remember we all loved the Muses in Hercules. This is like that, but on crack.
Hercules. Oh.
Yeah, it's literally that same vibe where you want to just sing along to every song. You want to play all the different roles because there's so many people singing at the same time, and you want to sing every line. But yes, so that's been my past. That's been my walking or biking music to listen to, because I feel like I'm also about to fight something.
Oh, as is the case, dear listeners, we're always either on the verge of getting sick, we are sick, or we are just getting over being sick. Apparently, that's just the way being an adult works.
Yes, I'm sniffling. I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
Besides getting sick, we would also like to kick off autumn. I know it's a little preemptive, but hey, as long as the numbers on the thermometer go down to at least 10, it's autumn. So we would like to pay homage to Campfire Tales today.
Mm-hmm. So imagine you're a teenager sitting around a campfire with a slight chill in the air. The counselor begins telling a tale that makes the hair raise on the backs of your arms, and it sends chills up your spine. They are using a flashlight to animate the shadows across their face, and as they get to the scariest part, you hear something moving in the trees, and everyone lets out a collective scream. Those are the stories we want to share with you today, and perhaps over the next few episodes.
So nowadays, I think people listen to true crime podcasts when they want to recreate that same feeling, but there's nothing better than good old-fashioned tales of horror. Campfire stories really find themselves in almost every culture around the world. Anthropologist Polly W. Weisner had an interesting article titled Embers of Society, where basically she talks about firelight talk, which examines the role fire played in evolving storytelling and culture through something called night talk. Basically, during the day, Groups focused on practical things and communications, such as talking about their complaints or the economy. And in this case, with hunter-gatherer societies, it would be things like hunting or trading. But at night, the focus really shifted to the imagination through singing, storytelling, and dancing. The campfire stories in North America probably had a mixed variety of sources, as most things in North America do, given its wide variety of influences. Naturally, there were the indigenous oral storytelling methods, and we've covered a few native cryptids in this podcast before. Settlers and other immigrants to the lands around the 18,000s also brought along their traditions, since there was a surge of horror writing during the Victorian England era, which began around 1837. In those early days, however, the campfire stories were less about monsters and more about wartime or military endeavors. One of the earliest editions we found highlighting this is from the 1843 edition of the Alexandria Gazette, which has a campfire story detailing an overzealous Colonel S. and his attempt to show off by having his men perform a simultaneous volley. Of course, it was disastrous, and that was the point of the story. Nowadays, however, campfire stories are usually reserved for days at the cottage, camp, to scare the children in your life, or podcast episodes like this. So gather around and get ready for the things that go bump in the night.
This story is our retelling of the Minnesota Maggot of Death by Doc Forgey, which can be found in his book, Campfire Tales. Every small town has a ghost story or apparition. There's the ghouls of Georgetown, the bog monsters in Florida, and of course, Hastings. Minnesota is no different. My old friend had taken me to his hometown and was showing me around. It was a quaint town with all the usual trappings, except for an overgrown church cemetery. Compared to the glossy high street, this place was downright wild. Brambles and bushes had overtaken the tombstones that looked so old. They would probably turn to dust if you breathed on them. This was a mighty odd thing. Even if all the inhabitants of the graves had long been forgotten, surely someone would have thought to tidy up the cemetery now and then. Weren't the townsfolk worried about angry, untended ghosts and ghouls? I asked my friend. As a response, he pointed out a particularly mangled-looking grave and lowered his voice as he told me about the maggoty creature that haunted this graveyard. The first person to see the maggot was the baker, Mr. Thomas. He had been working late to prepare the breads and buns for the next day, so he was rushing home around midnight. As he passed the graveyard, his attention was caught by a slithery, soft sound coming from within. Horrified and transfixed, Thomas watched as a large, oozing blob withered and wiggled its way out of the freshly dug grave of Mr. Jenkins. It grew bigger, and it thrashed up. When it was free from the ground, the giant maggot turned to face Mr. Thomas with a terrifying human expression. It almost seemed in recognition. Dismissing him as uninteresting, the large maggot began slithering out of the graveyard with its disgusting slimy body glowing in the moonlight. It wriggled down the street, leaving a trail of slime in its wake. Thomas followed at a distance, his heart pounding in his ears as he trailed the ghastly thing. The trail ended at the postmaster's door. Thomas decided to leave it be till the morning. The next day, Thomas recounted the events to his wife and his best friend. His wife told him the postmaster's entire family had strangely taken ill. They all resolved to see the thing again that night, so they waited by the cemetery, hidden from view. Once again, in the glow of the moonlight, a horrible maggot slithered and wriggled out of Mr. Jenkins' grave. It turned its large, groove-etched head in their direction, and it seemed to be staring right at them. The Thomases and their friend held their breaths, not daring to move. But once again, the creature disregarded them and began the slow journey into town. The trio followed the trail, and once again, it ended in the postmaster's house. They decided to go warn the family in the morning, lest the creature lashed out at being caught that night.
When your mail is late one too many times.
It's like, my dude, I know the Amazon package is supposed to be here. The app says it. Why is it not here yet?
It's like, what do you mean you couldn't find my address? I'm dead. I can't move. We missed you.
However, they were too late. The next morning, when Thomas went to stop by the postmaster's house, he was greeted by 4 shrouds and the doctor. All 4 had died last night, but since there were no obvious signs, the doctor had declared the mysterious death was carbon monoxide poisoning. Spooked, the trio went back to the graveyard that night and once again followed the maggoty creature through the streets. This time, it had slithered its way to the principal house. The 3 decided to visit the principal the next day before the maggots' second visit, but it was too late. That morning, the principal was declared dead, once again from a supposed carbon monoxide poisoning. Distraught, the Thomases continued keeping watch, determined to stop the next death as soon as they figured out where the creature was going. However, nothing happened that night, and the next night. They resolved to keep going back for the next 2 weeks to ensure the creature was truly gone. They didn't have to. On the 10th night, the soft sound of dirt being displaced filled the air, and the wriggling, slimy maggot emerged from the grave. It ignored the Thomases and made its way through straight to the Thomases' house. Mr. Thomas recognized where it was going at once, and the 2 ran home, grabbed their 5-year-old son, and rushed over to their friend's house. No one slept a wink. The next morning, they found their pet dog dead. The doctor declared it was a carbon monoxide poisoning.
I mean, unforgivable that they left their dog behind when they knew the worm was attacking.
Right? You had time to grab your kid. You also would have had time to at least try and grab the dog.
Yeah, I mean, also, the dog would have been easier to grab than the kid because the dog would have just followed you out.
Right? You probably had to, actually go, no, stay. We need to test this.
Mm-hmm. I'm feeling less and less bad for the Thomases.
Right? I mean, I'm just like, why have they not told anybody else? Especially after the second time. It's like, okay, this is a pattern now. Filled with anger and fear, the Thomases and their friend came up with a plan. They would dig up Mr. Jenkins' grave and set the whole thing on fire. Armed with kerosene and shovels, they waited till sunset and then dug up the grave of Mr. Jenkins. As they began digging, tiny maggots wiggled in the dirt, fleeing when they were unearthed. The deeper they dug, the more maggots they found. The deeper they dug, the fatter the maggots became. Finally, they struck the top of the coffin, and Mr. Thomas threw it open. Inside, Mr. Jenkins' rotting corpse lurched forward as if to sit up, and all 3 screamed in horror. But it was just the maggots wriggling inside his decaying flesh. The slimy, glowing maggots that pushed up against the dead man's skin and clothes. Miss Thomas threw the lid shut, and their friend doused the coffin in kerosene before they set the whole thing on fire, burning it to cinders. They filled the grave back up and left. Later, Mr. Thomas found out that Mr. Jenkins had problems with the postmaster and school principal before he died. He couldn't recall ever having even spoken with more than a few words to Mr. Jenkins in his entire life. But then he slowly remembered that first night at the graveyard when the creature had looked at him, its horrible face looking right at him as if it recognized him. And that is the tale of the Minnesota Maggot. Ugh, what a creepy story.
Okay, I want to find out if maggots have eyes, but I don't want to Google maggot.
I wish there was a way you could Google, but like suppress pictures, you know?
Oh, I hate when the pictures come up at the top, like when I'm just trying to find out a piece of information and it shows me like a picture of that thing. And I'm like, I don't want to see that. Yeah. I just want to know this one fact about this item. But maggots, I think, because we have a lot of outdoor cats in this area and we have a lot of small wildlife. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when you're hiking, you will come across like a dead bird or like a dead mouse or something. And the worst is when it like moves a little bit and you're like, oh, maybe it's alive, but it's just like all these like flies and the maggots around it. It's just disgusting. Oh. I can't even watch some cleaning videos like where people do like those really in-depth like home clean ones where like they go to people who are hoarders or who have medical issues. And there's like maggots in the food. I would pass out.
I don't know how people I can't relate. It would just be so much. This is just such a creepy ghost tale, but it's got all the classic Campfire stuff. It's the way it's told is of us. It's like I heard the story from my friend, and there's specific names given, and it's like there's like enough good details given of like the town itself where it feels real, right? Because sometimes you're just like, oh, there was this town far away, and then this happened, but it kind of like outlines like this was a pretty normal town. It's got all these usual trappings. It's got like these people living here, but it's just got this one weird thing.
I think one of the key elements really of Campfire Tales is it has to include something of the area nearby. And usually it's like some kind of landmark, or you talk about like this person that used to live there, or if you come across something like even slightly creepy, you go, oh, that's the house of so-and-so, and then you tell the tale. And I think usually in camps, like when you tell a story, you talk about something that occurred in that camp, or you talk about like a feature, maybe there's like a really creepy tree, or something nearby that you talk about. And I think that's how you get that immersive feel of it's close by, it's right here, versus telling a ghost story that might be about something that happened in a different country or that happened in a different town. But it's always that feel of old man Withers lived in that house right there, and that's the whole story. Like it's something that's immediately nearby.
Yeah. And again, it's usually told after like a long day of being outside, like whether it be camp or like in the woods for something else. So whoever is telling it is someone you've spent some time with, if nothing else, at least that whole day with. And then they almost always say like, oh, like I've worked at this camp for like 2 years, but the last person I worked with had worked here for 10 years, and they told me this thing they experienced when they were here or something. So it feels like that degree of, oh my gosh, it happened right here, and like you knew the person like who saw this.
Yeah, and then obviously like, at some point one of the camp counselors will go hide in the trees and make the noises so that it seems like something is coming to get you. Or at least that's what I've seen in TV shows because I've never been to like a sleepaway camp. So according to TV, that's what happens.
I was about to ask, have either of us actually done this?
I think I stay away from creepy stories and stuff around nighttime, so I'm not a fan. I prefer reading normal books at night, because even at times like when I'm reading something and if it has a scary element to it, like when I was reading this Forest of Stolen Girls and it had lots of creepy elements, I remember being like, I guess I'll just stay awake for as long as possible until I fall asleep and I don't have any dreams, because those kind of things really do freak you out if you listen to them right before bed. Which is why I'm also not like a true crime person, because I find it like too much. Because at least with horror stories or with ghost stories or even like monster movies and stuff like that, the bad guy is a cryptid. It's a monster. It's a creature. But like true crime, where it's about real people doing awful things to each other, that's too real.
Exactly. It's just too much. But I also remember like when I like as a kid, the few times I had like the opportunity to be around a campfire at night, not that it was specifically going to be like campfire stories happening, but you know, obviously could. There was almost always an option of a bunch of people being like, it's cold out here, I'm just going to go inside and play board games. And I always opted for board games rather than sitting around the cold fire getting all smoky like kind of that smoky campfire scent, I was like, I want to go play whatever card game is happening.
No, okay, that part I do like. I do like sitting by a campfire. I love the smell of burning wood. I love just campfires. I think fires, outdoor fires, fire pits, that kind of stuff I really like. It's just but I think during that time is the perfect time to talk about, deep things, or talk about your day, or ask, like play one of those card game questions where it's like getting to know people questions, or like deeper thought questions. I don't particularly like horror.
I probably enjoy it a lot more now as an adult, where I have a higher tolerance for like just engaging in conversation and interesting conversation with people. But just definitely as a kid, I was like, games. I'm there.
But that's what you do. You gamify the conversation by having those like cue cards or whatever.
Well, as a kid, that wasn't an option. It was either play Dutch Blitz inside, or you just talked with people or sang songs around the campfire. And I'm not musically inclined, so I was like, we already sang this part of the song again. Do we have to do it 3 more times, really?
I can't really hate on songs because they are my main method of teaching young kids. So I love a good rhyming song that's also educational. Anyways,
this is a very fun tale, and it sets the perfect kind of vibe leading into this fall season. And I'm really looking forward to being back and exploring more of these maybe slightly spookier tales, ones I couldn't handle when I was a kid.
As always, travelers, if you have a story you want to share, then please don't hesitate to reach out, especially if you have any spooky tales or any campfire tales. You can always reach us on our website and most social media platforms at Tales from Enchanted Forest or at From Enchanted. If, however, you are a bit old school like Sparrow, then you can email us at talesfromenchantedforest@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your questions, stories, comments, and suggestions, so please don't hesitate. And remember, travelers, if you enjoyed, or I guess didn't enjoy, what you heard here today and what we do here, then please do give us a review on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast. It helps the podcast grow and reach new travelers to join us on these adventures.
And remember, there's always a place for you in the Enchanted Forest.